Hi, and welcome to the Glam Reaper podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper herself. Today's podcast, I'm joined by two beautiful girls, definitely on the glam side of the death business, and they are called the DeathWives. Let's get into it. Welcome, the DeathWives. I love it. I love the name. I mean, it goes so well with the Glam Reaper. I can't even express it. Tell me, who are you both? Welcome to the show. Who are you both? What do you do separately, and what do you do together, and what do you hope to do in the future? Take it away.
You go first, Miss Lauren.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm Lauren, and I am half of DeathWives with Erin. I would say I'm an educator first. No, I guess I'm a mom first. It's like something moms are supposed to say. My mom first.
I love the eye roll, I guess.
I like yell at them right before I came in here. I was like, don't make a sound for 2 hours. I'll let you stay up late. So
excellent momage there.
My mom first. I'm an educator second, and I am a funeral director. So I'm a green funeral director. I work at a funeral home that is exclusively green. We don't do embalming. Everything that me and Erin preach, we practice as well. So
good.
Yeah, it's really nice. And I met Erin by teaching one of my early workshops on home funerals, and she came to it, and we just really connected and hit it off and stayed in touch. We're both single moms who work full time, and we were like, we have this passion, we want to do this. And over the years, we just put it together bit by bit by bit. And then last year, we kind of officially launched it, and we've been doing what we love since.
Amazing. I love the name. I really do. Like DeathWives, it's just so brilliant. Okay, excellent. All right. And Erin?
Yes, thank you. We love the name too. We felt like it was really easy because, the concept of death is so large. It's such a big conversation, but it's easy to say, well, you know what a midwife is? It's like that, only at death, and we walk people through kind of from beginning, middle to end, and all of these different various ways based on their needs and what they want. And primarily it's a, advocacy and education position. So that is what DeathWives is. I come through it through really just like a vein of deep grief of going through a lot of loss when I was young. And that was so impactful and profound that I didn't see a life beyond it. And that was because, there wasn't. I was going to carry it with me forever in different ways. And meandering and trying to figure out how to create a professional application out of that, even reaching out to Lauren. How long ago do you think I first reached out to you? I was still married, so it was a long time ago now.
I know.
Yeah, 8 years maybe.
I'm all 6, 7. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's go with the lesser.
She was so sweet to me. It was like I was looking for, a professional deaf community at that time, and there wasn't anything. I found like maybe 3 people on all of Google in Colorado, and I reached out to Lauren, and she replied so warmly and so sweetly, like she still does. Like just takes the time to be so kind with people because she cares so much about them. Like understanding how accessible this information is and how important it is. Which has become our mission at DeathWives. And then I'm also a death doula, and like you, Jennifer, a wedding planner. And so,
I
already had kind of the, ceremonies, large life transitions, walking people through these large transitions, and event planning as well, which folds so beautifully from both like the, doula portion and the planning portion into doing funerals.
Amazing.
So that's the short story of it.
Amazing. And we have I'm sure that's the shortened version. All right. We've had on the Glam Reaper podcast a death doula. She's actually only starting to become one. And what's interesting is I actually met her through my pet cremation jewelry line because she's into pet PR. And so what I loved about her was that she had nothing to do with the death industry whatsoever when I met her. And now all of a sudden here I am interviewing her about her having just completed a death doula course and,
Very cool.
Introducing that topic to people, because what the Glam Reaper podcast is, yes, industry people are going to be tuning into this, but predominantly it's about taking as Joe Public, as I call them, on the journey that all of us death people are kind of, because there's so many times over the last 10 years where I'll be talking and I'll realize, wow, people don't know what I'm talking about. This is so interesting that I'm in my own brain because I've been around this so much. And if I may ask, Erin, are you, since you and I are familiar in that sense, are you a trained funeral director, and I know because again, we're international here, we're over international waters, but I know in America, state by state, the rules are different in every state. I'm obviously in New York State. You guys are in Colorado. It's different state by state. So are you trained? Do you need to be trained?
Sure. Yeah. In a traditional sense, I am not trained as a funeral director.
Right.
In Colorado, you do not have to have a license to be a funeral director. And a lot of what we teach is how to do your own home funerals, and that a funeral director is great and we don't want to discount what they do. But if you would like to do that, you can, kind of an idea. So I do have a lot of, knowledge and experience that's not traditional, but no, I'm not a traditionally trained.
Yeah, because that's quite similar actually to my home country of Ireland. We have, similar to over here, you've got the National Funeral Directors Association. We have the Irish Funeral Directors Association back home, but there's actually no official, you could set up a funeral director, funeral home tomorrow in Ireland, and as much you could I've only ever been to Denver in Colorado, so I'm going to just pick on Denver because I just thought it was stunning and beautiful. Although the altitude really did get to me, 4 vodkas and I was away with the fairies. It was quite insane.
You gotta be careful with that.
Yeah. Myself and my friend, this was about 15 years ago. We will never forget Denver for that. We were 4 vodkas would have been nothing for us back then, and my God, it was quite the evening. But I digress. So that's really fascinating. And talk to me more about this. It's hugely topical right now in the media, in just top of people's minds, on the likes of social media, Facebook, Instagram. Home burials, home funerals, green burials, green funerals. It's kind of all anybody can talk about when it comes to the funeral industry, if they're not already nailing them for being cowboys or chasing people, ambulance chase. If we don't get negative press, we are starting to at least getting positive in terms of the innovations that people are coming up with. So talk me through your experience on that. Maybe Lauren, if you want to.
So I was a funeral director in a corporate setting, which I never thought I would ever do, but I really didn't have another option. It's still wild to me that there's so many corporately owned funeral homes and you don't know it. And that's a whole other topic. But I came home from a long day and I was drinking a lot of wine and a family undertaking came on PBS. I don't know if you've seen that documentary. And it like, I can still visualize that moment because it changed my life so much. I'm this funeral director watching this like magic take place in front of me. I'm like, that's how death's supposed to be. That's how funerals are supposed to be. And it was just like, why are we not doing this? Like, how come I didn't know that we could do this? And I'm a funeral director. Like, I should know this. To say the least, I left 6 months later. I had a child shortly after that, and then just started educating and saying, you don't need a funeral director. I'm a funeral director telling you, you don't need a funeral director. Let me show you how to do it, because this is how we've always done it. It's never been against the law. I'm here to support you, just to kind of remind you how to do it, but you can do it. This is your work. This isn't our work. I don't know your mom. You know your mom. Like, let me teach you how to do that. And that's what I did for 8 years. I took a very long sabbatical from the funeral industry and just educated on home funerals and really tried to dive deeper on different sides too. During that time, I volunteered at hospice, just like Erin does. And it gave me a totally different perspective. I hadn't ever dealt with the dying part. I'd only dealt with the bodies and the families and the grief part. So to be on the other end was just kind of like, it sounds cheesy, say the icing on the cake, but it was the full package of death. I feel like I was lucky enough to start with the end, and then to be able to go back to the beginning of the end was just like, it all came full circle. And I knew that this was it. There was nothing else I'd ever do. And I wanted people to understand it, because it makes life so much sweeter. It makes life so much richer when you know what our end is going to be like, just like birth. And Erin will talk about this part, because she started off as a birth doula, and that's a really common thing that I think we're starting to see, right? Is people do the work at the beginning and the end.
Yeah, well, and there's just so much in common. There's so much commonality between the two, from how you care, for your patient or for your client, to the spiritual aspects of it, even to like the energetics. A death is birth in reverse energetically. You're contracting to bring life forward, and you're, retracting kind of energetically as you're dying. And there's even a rhythm to it in death, like there is in pregnancy and in birth. And then I worked in hospice as well, like Lauren said, and hospice is really a wonderful experience. Like 95% of what I have to say about hospice is really good things. So I'm appreciative of hospice, but hospice is often corporate run or owned by a church, or has whatever form of red tape that particular hospice has. And so they have limitations around what their volunteers can offer. And a lot of times, for example, if, the one that I was working for was Methodist. And so we weren't really allowed to speak about religious or faith-based things unless they lined up with that viewpoint. And that's great for the people who that works for, but there are so many people that doesn't work for, right? And so having a death doula who can go in and provide that kind of care, but what they do is a custom tailored package based on what that person needs and what their family has, communicated to you that they need. It just fills in gaps, it fills in gaps in care that I think is already good. But we get to do it without management,
Yeah,
go deeper and be more creative.
It's interesting. I worked in a hospice back home in Ireland. And first of all, can I just say I applaud you, and I applaud anybody that works in hospice. And the same when I was talking to the death doula we had on, I think it's incredible. And I'm somebody who, I think we all have certain beliefs and certain things, notions we call them in Ireland, of what something is about. I definitely believe that people were put on this planet for certain things. I know what I was put on this planet for. I know I would not be able to cope with a hospice environment and the whole death doula thing. I think it's incredible what you do. I couldn't. I know I couldn't. It's like I've made a joke before that if you've ever seen the movie Bridesmaids, where she's in the car with all the puppies in the back, like that's me. You know what I mean? I couldn't work in an adoption shelter, because I'd either have all the kids or the puppies or whatever the adoption center was for. I'd have them all coming home with me. Like I remember back years ago in Ireland with my cremation jewelry, I had an actual office where people came in, and I actually had to remove it and put it online, because I was taking so much grief home with me, and it was just destroying me, and I knew it was, and everyone around me could see it. And it's interesting, because what I do now is mostly memorial planning, and I feel like there's a difference though, because I maybe take it to completion. And again, there are different, I think you touch on things and you figure out what it is that works for you. Whereas now I love telling people stories through the memorial, and that literally makes my heart swell bigger. Like I can't even express the feeling when I come home after I've done a memorial and it's been amazing. That just makes me, I don't know, I guess it's just different strokes for different folks, and that's what I know you guys promote, and that's 100% what I'm about. I talk me through, and it's back to basics, as you've said. Our Irish people in Ireland, we were known for our wakes, and very much back to the basics. But talk me through, because I know there's people listening going, what the hell is a home funeral? What's a green funeral? What are they talking about? So maybe walk us through an example of what that looks like for a person today in America.
Sure. So our funeral home actually will help families have home funerals if they still don't feel comfortable to do it on their own, which has really opened the door for this becoming, I think, more normal. I think this is like a side passion project of mine that Erin knows, is I want funeral directors to take our classes. I want funeral directors to start taking this information and using it where it's needed. So using it in their community and saying, hey, did you know actually you could have mom at home instead of coming to our funeral home and only having a 2-hour service. We'll let you have mom at home for 2 days, like, and we'll make sure she's cared for while she's at home. So with a home funeral, I think the main thing that most people don't realize is you don't have to be embalmed, right? Embalming is very American. And I say this all the time. It is, embalming is the American flag and apple pie. Like, it is very true to us. And it's about making death seem not real. It's about preserving a state that doesn't exist. And I'm not bashing on Americans, but that's us. Like, we want to preserve something that's not real, and we love like to put on a show.
Yep. We have a hard time with just the temporary nature of anything here in America, and there's a huge death aversion, really, just generally. Like, it's reduced to being something campy, right? Like, people can relate to death in terms of Halloween and horror movies and that kind of stuff much more easily than they can relate to it in terms of like somebody who you loved and how to honor them and how to maybe honor the environment while doing so, which is a much more accurate association.
And I think that's what has always been really important to me, is not painting a false picture of death, because it makes it less, I don't know, digestible. It makes it less real when it isn't real. So that's the first thing I tell everybody, is that embalming is never required by law. No matter what state you're in, there is no law that requires embalming. Funeral homes can have their own policies. And usually it's just because they're miseducated. And I can say that because I was a funeral director that was miseducated for a long time. So I know that there's a lot of funeral homes out there that just don't know. And I think that they would really benefit if they did know. So wink, wink, funeral homes.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those industries that still uses old, outdated, antiquated practices, and they're a little bit resistant as an industry to innovation and to new stuff. And so really, you know, what that's caused is now there's an alternative death care industry rather than there could have been innovation from within, or, you know, and so now we've kind of got two things going on, and they still have the lion's share by far and wide, but we are so grateful for the response people are having to this, you know, death positive kind of movement, if you will, that's happening. Like, and maybe it's just the bubble that we live in. Maybe we just tend to talk to people who are psyched on it, but it seems like every new room we walk into, or community we walk into, of people who, you know, either don't interface with death or they interface with it in a limited way, a different way than we do, they're always like really interested in learning about it. It's the most relatable thing, you know, in the world. You know, we always say it, it's so obvious, but it's the only thing we're all going to do for sure.
Yeah.
Besides, like, maybe breathe air.
Yep.
Great
Absolutely.
Equalizer.
Right? Equalizer, yeah. And
Mm.
you know, I think that it has the potential to do a lot for just the collective consciousness, such a buzzword, but, you know, for people to really digest that and to understand, like, death is coming for you. It's certain.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you want it to die. And then, like, let's talk about really what constitutes a good death. You know, that's one of the concepts we talk about in our class, is what constitutes a good death in every category. Like, what constitutes a good death, first of all, physically. Like, do you know, what's your relationship with pain like? Do you want medication? You know, where do you want to be located physically? Who's allowed there? Who's not allowed there? So the basics. Then what is your relationship with death like, you know, from a fear perspective? Emotionally, are you afraid? What are you afraid of? What's it like spiritually? You know, do you have questions about the afterlife? Are you at peace with God? Do you believe in God? Do you feel like you need to come to some conclusions around that before you die? And then the same question in terms of relations, you know, who do you need to talk to so that you can be at peace? Like, they're really simple things. It's nothing new. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's going back to the old ways.
Yeah, but it's a tip, and that's why it made me laugh. Not laugh, but even with your name, DeathWives, it's historically women were the caretakers. We were the death doulas. We were the ones that took care of the body. I know back home in Ireland, we had we were a huge part of it, and then all of a sudden it was men in suits, and you know, and I mean, I'd love to know, what are your thoughts on the controversial book, the Jessica Mitford book? Do you agree with her? Do you agree with her in parts? You know, what are your thoughts as a funeral director, especially Lauren? I guess that would have
Yeah.
probably been something you read early days.
I think it's one of those books that I'm like, yes, thank
Mm.
you. Thank you for opening that up, because one of the things I teach in our classes, I talk about the Funeral Trade Commission, or the Federal Trade Commission, 1984. It was because of that book that made them realize, whoa, what's happened with the funeral work? Like, why is it like this? And so in that 1984 law is when they included that embalming is never required by law. And I think that opened up a door. So what, that's 36 years ago, not that long ago, but that's opening it up to be like, oh, let's have more conversations about death, because, oh, I don't have to pay this much money. Oh, I don't have to be embalmed. Like, oh, I can use different funeral homes. I'm not stuck with this one. So in just 36 years, I think it's starting to shift back into our hands again. And I say our hands, but I mean like the community, the families, the people's hands, not the men in suits who kind of said, oh, we could profit off this, can't we? Let's turn this into a business. And death really, I'm a funeral director, so I don't want to bash on embalming necessarily. I don't want to bash on funeral homes because they're needed in our society right now.
And there are a lot of amazing ones.
There are.
Oh, yeah. And Erin knows this, like, I'm not a fan of embalming. I personally wouldn't need it, but I do know that there are some amazing restorative artists that give families that closure that they wouldn't be able to have without embalming and without that art. And that's really, I mean, that's a gift in itself. Do I think everybody needs to be embalmed? No, absolutely not. We don't do a single embalming at our funeral home, and I've never had a single complaint. When I was a funeral director doing embalmings, I had many complaints. I'm not like many, you know, she doesn't look like this. She looks waxy. She smells strange. You know, if you've been around an embalmed body, most people don't realize the smell that they're smelling is like a chemical.
That's not the death smell.
Flower. No. But they don't know what they're smelling. They don't know that they're smelling this, you know, cancer causing chemical.
But that's, and actually, you know, Erin, you just named it there, is that I'm sure there's many people out there, many people listening to this that would associate that with the death smell, because it is, even back home in Ireland, it's not, you know, illegally, you don't have to get it done. It was one of my first things I mentioned in my book was, guys, you know, you don't have to do a lot of these things, just FYI. And so, yeah, it's fascinating actually that I'd say a lot of people would attribute the smell that they smell from the embalming fluids and things. It's crazy. Now, when you say, because what's interesting to me is I know from being in the industry and stuff that, like, I would like to probably do a lot with my mum, right, when she goes. But my dad, I'd feel awkward with. I wouldn't be able to sort of wash and dress. It would just feel weird and inappropriate, and I just wouldn't be down with that. Do you've kind of said that you guide people through that, so I'm sure that this obviously is not a shocker. This obviously isn't a, you know, crazy new question.
Yeah, no, and I think if you are a caretaker for your loved one at the end of their life, if they're on hospice care at home, it's a very easy transition to care for them after they've died.
I'm sure.
If you haven't been in that situation, honestly, most people that have had a home funeral usually have a caretaker of some sort in the family. I had a woman who was alone, and so she needed our help, like just physically to help her move. But 90% of the time the family has it. And I did a home funeral right before COVID, and I'll never forget this family, because I mean, literally a week later we were locked down. And so I went into their home, and they wanted to have a day with their dad before we took him to the funeral home. And she was just like, no problem. She was just like, pull down the sheets, and he was just laying there naked, but she's blessing his body and stuff. And I'm just thinking, like, you know what? This is beautiful. Like, this is how she's showing her dad a final send off in the way that
See, I'm just like, my dad would kill me. He'd
Oh,
be
yeah.
like, no, no,
I
you
would,
didn't.
Erin would probably agree with me. Like, I would never want to be in that position with my dad. Like,
No.
No.
Yeah,
I wouldn't, but also it's because of the reason, Jennifer, that you just said, because he wouldn't want it, right? Like the heart of a doula isn't necessarily to push what they want, but to honor what the client wants. And so, if your dad really wanted you to wash his dead body and he came to you before he died and asked for that, you'd probably find it within yourself to do it, but he's, it's not going to. And, I would even say the same thing about embalming. I couldn't agree more with Lauren that it's not needed. It's snuck in there in a kind of a sneaky way. Most people, don't even know that it's happening, and it creates this big industry that's toxic and kind of erosive of people's grief, exploits them. But having said that, I think there are times where if somebody's had a really bad accident and they need a lot of restorative work, and they're Catholic and they want an open casket funeral, and that's what they want, and that's what's going to be the most healing option for them, then like by all means do it, right? And so the job isn't like you have to be green all the time. That's a big consideration. I care a lot about the environmental aspect, but really at the end of the day, it's like, how do we honor your loved one? What will bring healing to the people that are alive?
Yep, absolutely. And it's, do you know what, it's again, you're just saying what I believe and promote all the time, which is each to their own. Like there's never ever in this world, I don't think, going to be a one size fits all, a one fix it fits all. Like it's never going to happen. We are humans evolving constantly. We're always gonna want different things, have different opinions about things. And I mean, absolutely, embalming. I mean, for me as an Irish person, I have seen several Irish people shipped home. Repatriation requires embalming to a certain extent because it's a long trip. I've just told my mom, I'm like, if you want to see me, and I understand if you do, if you want to physically see me, if I pass away and you're still alive, you need to fly over and you get your closure then and cremate my ass and send me home. Or whatever the next, more ecological version is of cremation, which hopefully by then there will be. But I've told her. Yes. So I want to hear more about that. Tell me about green cremation, or the next best thing, or whatever it is.
So the next best thing is, better thing in our opinion, is water cremation. It's got a lot of other names, but we're going to stick with water cremation for right now. So when you think of flame cremation, you're using the element of fire. With water cremation, we're using the element of water to break down the body. It's the temperature of the water varies depending on which model of the machine you have, but it's not at a boiling point. It's like between 105 and 145 degrees. And the body is in the machine, again, for a varying duration, depending on which model of the machine you have. But the fastest ones are like 6 to 8 hours. The slower ones are maybe 10 to 12 hours. And the body is in there with warm water and lye, alkali, and it breaks down first into the soft tissues, and all of the skin will break down into this liquid that's really bioavailable that can be used as a fertilizer that we're calling tea tree. And the bones, then the skeleton, remain. And so when the process is over, you've got this fertilizing product that the family can have if they want to literally, fertilize their gardens, which is amazing. Talk about reintroducing life, right? Already immediately continuum. And then they also receive the cremains of the bones. So once the bones dry, then they're still ground up and they get back something that looks similar to cremains or ashes, but it's a more white, a little bit cleaner looking substance, more like sand.
Well, what did you think of that episode, guys? I thought it was really interesting. What the girls are doing is fantastic, and definitely something that you should all check out and dig a bit further into. They're on Instagram, and I love their work on Instagram. So check them out, and all the links and stuff are below. And if you want to send us a question in, or you have a guest that you think we should absolutely get on the show, please email us at glamreaperpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll talk to you soon.